Hello and welcome to GuyLogicGaming. My name is Temko and this is The Great Whale Road, coming on early access on July 27th. It is a RPG in a turn-based reactionary fashion, and it's all about the Danish Vikings, you would say, or the Danes and the Saxons and the Picts and so on that lived in the North Sea area. So that's between where the Netherlands are currently, Denmark is, and where England is. So that region where they live around 1000 AD. So it's all about that, and it's about surviving with a clan and building that and fortifying that and not starving. So it's a bit of an RPG, it's a bit of a strategy game, and it's a bit about decision making and management. So before we dive into the gameplay, let's go ahead and dive into the options and talk a little bit about that, about PC performance and all stuff like that, and then go ahead and dive into gameplay and talk about where the game currently stands and whether or not it has some good foundations based on its early access premiere, what their goals are with early access, and how I think and feel about them being able to achieve that. So options wise, yeah, I have no comment beyond saying this is abysmal. Yes, it's a 2D game. Yes, it doesn't need a lot of options, but currently doesn't even have the basics. It has music and sound effects, no volume control, no control on resolution, no control full screen window, no colorblind mode, but again, that is a pipe dream at this point. It doesn't have anything in terms of options, so that is not okay. So I really hope they fix that as soon as possible. Other than that, you have a part of the campaign, which is the first about 3 hours of the game. So what I'm going to do is do new campaign and run you through the first 10 or 15 minutes and talk about the various gameplay aspects, because options wise, they're not off to a good start. So when you load in the game, the first thing you'll notice is this very cool art style. It sort of combines a Western style comic book with a very cool 2D, less flat colored art style in the actual game. This little duality gives it a bit of a adult theme from the cutscenes, while still giving it a cartoony and more relaxed feel when you're in the overworld. I like this duality quite a bit. Speaking about the graphics and art style, I do have to say that the historical depictions here, both in terms of buildings, in clothing, in the way certain interactions work, is very well put together. The buildings you see for the various Danes, as well as for the Saxons, the Picts, and so on and so forth, are very accurate to their time period, which is around 1000 AD, which is pretty damn cool. I really like that. Also, the use of language, writing, and stuff like that really does fit the game quite well, and it does breathe forth an entire feel of everything fitting together quite a bit. Now, while I'm not a fan of the audio assets of the game, because I feel, one, the options available are so limited that you can't get the best out of them, and two, they are quite repetitive, is that even then they do fit quite well together. Now, speaking of writing in regards to art style and the entire feel of the historical aspect of the game, the end result is really that even the writing feels quite well put together in regards to use of language, in regards to use of idioms related to that time period and related to those tribes and people that live there. So on the art aspect of things, I have nearly nothing to complain about outside of the audio, which is repetitive. Now, going into the actual gameplay, the game can be split up in roughly 2 segments and a combat mode. The 2 segments are your base trading and resource accolation system. Every season you accolade certain people to certain tasks. Farmers for farming, troops for training, traders for trading, and you have 10 resources. You can spread them around, and based on that, you'll get food, you'll get hides for trade, you'll get better trade deals, you get more troops or better trained troops, stuff like that. And you do this every season, and that way you build a stockpile. So one season you could spend a lot on food and have enough over to not need to add extra for the next season. But if you don't spend anything, you might actually lose out on certain bonuses you may have accrued over time. So you have to balance this out a little bit. The second part to this is the variety of actions that are available. The resting mode recovers your troops' health. These are people in your warband. I'll get into that in a little bit. And then you have things like the blacksmith, which allows you to buy gear. And that is still very underdeveloped, which is something else I'll come back to in a second. And you have things like traders that will buy your stuff off you, and you can buy stuff from and sell in different villages. And then you have hunting, which lets you go out for food with your warband and gather some food and hides you can either use during your travel or trade for other resources you might need or want. This is a pretty well put together idea, and the art style coupled with the various ways ways you can interact with it does feel very well put together. Problem here is that something like the blacksmith, for example, is extremely underdeveloped, as well as trading also being very underdeveloped. There's currently no way that I found to buy armor, and the amount of weapons that are available are so limited that the upgrades are non-existent, and you can't craft anything like that, and I've not found any way to gather any new ones. So that is a damn shame. I do hope they improve upon that during early access, but as it is right now, this is a very bare bones system that needs massive expansion. Another thing regarding trading is that currently I have not found any singular way of sailing my ship to a different settlement without it being a story-driven event, which is something I hope they fix very fast, because I feel this is a cornerstone of allowing a player to explore their own story as they deem fit. And right now it's a very linear experience without any deviation from the main story, and even that main story isn't finished yet for any of the races. So you have the Danes, which has half a campaign currently implemented, and then you have the two other races which have not even been implemented yet at all. So again, here we are missing a lot of core feature and expansion of core features in this overview mode. Now the second part of this overview mode is the travel between various locations. So if you want to go from your own town to a town down the line for a quest, you have to spend time traveling there. And based on the distance, this travel takes longer or shorter. During this travel, you can meet other outposts, you can buy, trade, stay overnight at those outposts, recover your health, gather food, buy weapons, sell weapons, and so on and so forth until you reach your desired location, and then you can finish your quest. Now, both during the initial season selection and resource acquisition system, as well as during the travel system, random encounters take place. These random encounters are very well together. The problem here, again, is the variety and amount of them. It's so bad even that sometimes I would have a random event happen during one season selection, and not 20 seconds later, that same random event would trigger again. And then I'd go sailing, and the very next settlement I encounter would have that same random event trigger again. The amount of random events currently in the game that trigger, even though they are all pretty well put together, and the use of language, story, and humor is quite well put together, is so limited that within about an hour, you'll have encountered 80 to 90% of all viable random encounters, both in the resource acquisition system during settlements, as well as during sailing for the variety of combat, sailing related random encounters. And these random encounters have bonuses associated with them as well as consequences. Bonuses such as faster travel if you do a good decision during a windy day, or even damage to your ship if you run on a shoal. So there is definitely some trade-offs here and there, and these are very well put together, and there's a timer and your troops advise you regarding what they feel is the best course of action, so you get some hints here and there. The idea of the system is very well put together, but the execution is very limited, and that is a damn shame. So going from the limited scope of a non-existent blacksmithing system, a non-existent freeform traveling system, and a very limited scale for the random encounter system, all of these foundations are very well thought out, and the visuals are quite well put together, and they provide a very coherent and cohesive whole. Everything just lacks substance. And yes, this is a game coming to early access, but even now the early access version is very limited, and the current development cycle developers are saying of about 5 to 6 months for the game to be feature complete and ready for full-on release, I feel is beyond optimistic. I would personally, as a guesstimate, put this at a minimum of a year necessary in early access based on other games that have spent time in early access, such as Person Architect, Overfall, or even Subnautica, which is still in early access quite a while down the line. Now, the second part of this game that I feel needs massive rework is the combat system. This is my current biggest objection to the title. While I can live with the lack of content while the game is fleshed out, the current combat system is fundamentally flawed in two ways. One, it uses a grid-based combat system where your main character's goal is to survive and your own goal is to kill your opponent's main character. These two spawn at the first time, and then you draw 3 cards. These 3 cards are based on your crew, so if you have a lot of assault type characters in your crew, you will get a lot of combat oriented cards for damage. If you have a lot of heavies in your crew, these are sort of the tanks, you get a lot of defensive based cards in your deck. The problem is that most of these cards are very high end, and you can only use them in later rounds for your turn. So if you draw a card that gives you +4 defense, but you're going to use it in turn 7, that card is fundamentally useless. The second problem here, outside of the RNG of this, is that even adding new characters to the combat, so your companions in your warband, also requires you to draw cards. So if you're unlucky, you could have 5-6 rounds of not having a single extra companion, which will make you lose the combat flat out from RNG, and that is kind of useless. Also, there's no benefits for going into combat, while there are downsides for losing it. And again, that is not a good thing. And while there are some story-based reasons to go into combat, there's no actual reason outside of story requirements to go into combat to get something. You won't get loot, you won't get gold, you won't get silver, you won't get pelts. Nothing really comes out of it except the nice feeling of breaking the monotony of sailing a ship. The goal is to kill the opponent's main character, and because you move into that way, the game devolves for combat quite fast into you just surrounding the main character, protecting your own main character, and smashing him until he falls over and ignoring everything else, which devolves a very interesting idea for a combat system into a very basic and fat system which just doesn't work in any way. On top of that, the controls for this system are very badly implemented. Clicking on certain characters moves them sometimes it doesn't move them, sometimes it switches places with a different character, blocking their movement at that point, and clicking on the base model works, but clicking somewhere else on the model might work on certain occasions, and so on and so forth. And all of that together just brings me to a feeling this game needs way more time in the oven before being not only released fully commercially, but also even released on early access, because right now I feel players will pick up this game, play it for an hour, notice it's missing humongous chunks of content, but still be charmed by the art style and give up. So going from there into the early access period, the game has a very good idea of what it wants to achieve, but even the base foundations are still missing many components, and I feel the game needs serious time in the oven to flesh out these base foundations and also then flesh out everything else around it, from the different races to the progression systems that are still need to be implemented for your characters, to crafting, trading, freeform sailing, different ships, and so on and so forth. So a Great Whale Road is on the track to be something quite enjoyable from a strategic and RPG experience, but it is far from their point, as you're just waiting at least a little bit later until its early access period before diving in yourself. And you can check it out on Steam on July 28th. So thank you for watching. If you like this video, press that like button below. If you didn't like this video, there's a dislike button for exactly that purpose. And if you want to see more content like this on the channel, just press that subscribe button down below and we will deliver. Until then, I wish you a good day, and until next time, right here on GuyLogic.